Continuing on, if two lines are perpendicular, the statement that comes after if, this is considered the hypothesis. The statement that comes after the word then, which is they intersect at a 90-degree angle, that represents the conclusion. So the hypothesis is the statement or the phrase that comes after if, and the conclusion is the phrase that comes after then. For parallel lines, we would say that if two lines are parallel, then they do not intersect. Once again, if we're going to be looking at our hypothesis, it is the phrase that comes after if. That's the hypothesis. The conclusion is they do not intersect. It is the phrase that comes after the word then. For segment or angle bisectors, we would say if a line is a segment bisector or an angle bisector, pick one, then it intersects the segment at its midpoint and cuts the segment in half. And what I mean by its midpoint means the segment's midpoint. So what we would say is that a line is a segment bisector, would be our hypothesis, with the conclusion being it intersects the segment at its midpoint and cuts the segment in half. You could simply say it cuts the segment in half. That's perfectly fine as well. But what we're doing is we're taking definitions of terms and turning them into if-then statements. And that's what you will see a lot in this unit, is taking ideas and turning them into if-then statements that can either be true or false. So in example number 3, we want to decide whether the conditional statement as is true or false. If it is false, then we need to find a counterexample. So letter A says, if it is Saturday, then school is closed. This is a true statement. School is not in session if it is a Saturday. So there's no counterexample. We only use counterexamples if it's false. For letter B, it says, if an angle measures 112 degrees, then it is an obtuse angle. That is true. Any angle that is 112 degrees, we do say that it is obtuse. Letter C says, if 3x plus 10 equals 16, then x equals 2. Let's go ahead and see if this is true. I'm going to subtract 10 on both sides, and I end up with 3x is equal to 6. I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and I find that x equals 2. So yes, this is a true statement. And letter D says, if you live in the United States, then you live in Michigan. Well, no, this one's false. If you live in the United States, then you live in Michigan. All people in the USA does not live in Michigan. So this is where you would come up with a counterexample. And a counterexample could be anything, any one thing that proves this statement is true. And that's like if you live in Ohio, you live in the U.S. and not in Michigan. There are plenty of people who live in Ohio who do not live in Michigan. So we are not interested in the people who have 2 homes or anything like that. We're looking for people who live outside of Michigan, yet they live in the United States. So any state or any city outside of Michigan would be considered counterexamples. And all you need is simply one counterexample. Let's go ahead and move on to the next page. What we want to do in this next page is we want to write the converse of the conditional statements in example number 2 and determine whether the converse is true this time or if it is false. And once again, if it is false, then we want to provide a counterexample. So this time we're going to take our previous statement and we want to write the converse of it. So in letter A, it says, if it is Saturday, then school is closed. So we would reverse. If school is closed, then it is Saturday. So that's what we would say. If school is closed, then it is Saturday. True or false? This is the converse. We flipped around our if-then statement. And I'm going to say it's false. With my counterexample being Sunday. School is also closed on Sunday. So there's my counterexample. That statement cannot be true. Let's go ahead and look at letter B. For letter B, it says, if an angle measures 112 degrees, then it is an obtuse angle. Please be careful here. Our subject of the sentence is an angle. That's our subject. So when we write our statement, we always write our subject. Don't say if it is an obtuse angle, then an angle measures 112 degrees. That is inappropriate. We always write down what our subject is before we use a pronoun. So I'm going to write, if an angle is an obtuse angle, then its measure is 112 degrees. Is this true or false? Well, it's false. Obtuse, if an angle is an obtuse angle, then its measure is 112. Absolutely not. There's a lot of angles that could be obtuse angles. So all you need is one counterexample, like 120 degrees. 120 degrees, that's obtuse. And it is definitely not 112. So 120 degrees is obtuse. So there's one counterexample. You could come up with any number, and that's perfectly acceptable, but you just need one example. Letter C says, if x is equal to 2, then 3x plus 10 equals 16. Let's go ahead and look at that. If x equals 2, then 3x plus 10 equals 16. So let's go ahead and see if that's true. So we would substitute 2 in for x, and we would go 3 times 2 plus 10. Does that equal 16? Is 6 plus 10 equal to 16? Yes, that is a true statement. So there is no counterexample for that problem. Let's go ahead and look at letter D. Letter D says, if you live in the United States, then you live in Michigan. So since you is used twice, you don't have to change the subject or pronoun because they use a pronoun throughout the whole statement. So our reverse would be, if you live in Michigan, then you live in the United States. So let's go ahead and write that down. If you live in Michigan, then you live in the United States. That's a true statement. Anybody who lives in Michigan lives in the United States because Michigan is in the United States. So there's no counterexample to that because it's always true. Until Michigan decides to secede from the Union, which I don't see that happening anytime soon, this is going to always be a true statement. Let's go ahead and look at example number 5. It says, write each statement in if-then form. So what you have to do is look at these statements and decide what the subject is and what the predicate is going to do. What's going on here? And there's a lot of variation. So there's many ways to answer these questions or rewrite these problems. So there's many answers. You just want your answer to make sense. So it says all students at Salem High School take an English class. So you have to say, what do you want your hypothesis to be and your conclusion? It depends. You can say if you are a student that takes an English class, then you attend Salem High School. You could say if you are a student at Salem High School, then you take an English class. If then. It just depends. You could say English first and then Salem High School. You could say Salem High School and then an English class. But the point is that you want to take this all students and separate it. If you are a student, then you do this. That's what you want to do in terms of writing your statement. This is just one answer. Many answers are possible as long as they make sense. All right angles measure 90 degrees. So maybe starting off with all right angles, if an angle is a right angle, then its measure is 90 degrees. That's one way. You could say if an angle's measure is 90 degrees, then it is a right angle. That's perfectly acceptable as well. But you want to make sure that you are identifying your subject from the very beginning. Finally, letter C, every dog has 4 legs. So since we're talking about dogs, I would recommend saying, if an animal is a dog, then it has 4 legs. You could also say, if an animal has 4 legs, then it is a dog. You're welcome to write that as well. I did not ask you if these statements were true or false. I just wanted you to write them as an if-then statement. And that is the end of today's lesson. If you have any questions over anything, please feel free to email me. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day.